Hey guys, welcome to my tutorial in painting apples. Apple slices, whole apples, and cloth, metal, sugar, porcelain, a lot of things here to tackle. So we'll have a couple parts, and this is the first part. And I'm going to walk you through my mock-up first. So before I began this painting, I did a mock-up in Procreate of the reference photo that you see on the left here. But I did do the mock-up in person. I was looking at it and adjusting the colors as I was looking at the still life. And as you can see, always the colors in my mock-up or in my painting are a lot warmer than you'll see in a photograph, because I find that photographs seem to cool everything I take a photo of multiple degrees. Either that or my eyes see things a lot warmer. So I always warm things up. It's just what I see. I see it much, much warmer than how it looks in the photograph. So this is me in Procreate. It's just a quick time lapse of the adjustments I made. Added a little apple slice for composition. And then here, I'm launching into this in Paint on my underpainting. So the orange you see on the left is, as I just said, an underpainting. And if you want to know how to start an underpainting from the drawing, you can look at a video I'll link to in my post. The video itself is sped up 30%. So you see I am going a little bit faster, just so you don't watch the full 5 hours of me painting. I'm starting with the apple slices here because they're going to go off quickly. Even a few hours will change the color of sliced apples, and I really wanted to get that lush look of them. As I'm coming in here, I have a warm light on a fleshy white surface, the apple. I know that I want to keep the sugar cool, so I'm bringing in a lot of warmth into the fleshiness of the apple, which I think works quite well. And I have that warm light, so it does make sense. Now, what's in these colors here? So you have white, cad yellow, yellow ochre, maybe a dip of cad red or cad orange, and that's probably it. That's a very saturated white, so it is mostly white, of course, right? With the yellow ochre serving don't know why I can't speak today. Serving as what darkens it in some areas. And of course your lightest value being titanium white plus cad yellow. And I use cad yellow instead of lemon yellow because I have a hot light and cad yellow will make it look warmer. So I'm hitting, just because I have this already on my brush, I'm hitting all the light-facing surfaces of the apple slices. There are two sides to each of the apple slices, one that's in light and one that's in shadow. The shadow one can be deceptive. It's a white in shadow, so we tend to think of it and want to paint it brighter than it is. But, as some people are probably shouting at the screen, whites in the shadows are much darker than what we think. And even if we don't see them that dark, better to push it so that it does register as shadow so you can maintain the form of the apples. In my particular preference, I should say. Other people maybe don't want to have more three-dimensionality, so that's fine. In my setup right here, which it looks like I'm bumping into, the still life is on the left. It's set up right now with a hot 4000K light on it, and I'm standing to the right, and I'm painting it. So I am painting this from life right now. That's what the video is of. And the photograph, as I mentioned, is just for your reference. So there's a little sliver of light on this apple here. This one was not in the original photograph. I believe I took out the reference. I added it in my mind. No, I added it in the Procreate mockup, which gave me a chance to figure out the composition. And I felt like without this apple breaking up that rectangular space, it just looked odd in the composition. So I added in this apple slice to give a certain flow and breaking up the regular shapes in the composition. So you notice here on this slice, this is a half of an apple. I feel like I sound like I'm diagnosing apples. See, this is a half of an apple. This is this complicated thing. But the light is striking it. I'm sorry, my chair's squeaking a bit there. The light is striking this at a different angle, and it's also farther away. So when I was looking at this, I wanted to cool this down. So you see there's more blues and purples and greens. And I put too many brushstrokes through this. I think I do knock it back a few times because as I started this saying, it's farther back. I don't want to be making this the most beautiful apple because it's not in the best position. It's sort of like, we've got three apple slices. Sorry, we have four, three normal apple slices and this half slice. Some of these apple slices should be more detailed than the other. And that's not because we personally like that slice more. It's that the one you choose to be more detailed, the ones that perhaps are better focal points, they will look better next to a slice that has less detail, such as this one in the back, which right now has too much detail. I always contradict my own words. Um, does that make sense? You know? So it's like if everything is in focus, nothing is in focus, is what I'm trying to say. So picking a few objects to really do a lot of detail in, and then looking, especially when it's a repeating object like apple slices, and then looking at some to say, where can I just be really loose and tackle them in the fewest brush strokes can make the ones that you did the detail in sparkle even more. Okay, looks like it is finally time to go into my shadows. Okay, that purple right that you see I just put on, I can guarantee you that does not exist in the actual still life painting. And you see, what did I do there? I added a bit of yellow into it, and that knocked it down because yellow is the complement of purple. So if I say that's too chromatic, and that's what I mean by that's too purple, normally what I mean is, well, maybe it shouldn't be purple, but usually I mean that's too chromatic of a purple. So I added some yellow, and I knocked that down. Why I started with purple though, and you see now, even though you saw me knock the purple back down, that shadow really does still read as purple, is because I have this lovely warm yellow in the light, and the complement of yellow is purple, right? So if I make the shadow the complement, then I feel like it's going to register even more the play of warm versus cool, you know? So that's what I'm doing there. And as I'm painting this, especially on this area, that little top divot, I'm squinting at the still life. I'm trying to see, where do I lose an edge at the top? How do colors transition? When I squint, do I still see that little dark of the seed, or how does it really look? For some reason, when we paint what we see when we squint, at least in the style that I'm explaining anyways, things look a lot more realistic. Most of the time, when something doesn't look right, it's because there's too much detail, which is sort of contradictory, because sometimes at the end of a painting, in order to bring a painting to life, you need to add all those details in. So that is contradictory. But usually when something fundamentally at its base level, and you haven't done the highlights and stuff yet, right? If it looks wrong, it's because it's too much. There's like a seed that you have defined beyond any possible visibility of that seed, and that's why knocking it back and just rendering something on its light and shadow, simplifying it, can read better. Okay, so carrying over this shadow on this apple, and thinking about how that shadow might be different. If it's closer to the light, perhaps the shadow is darker. The other apple, even though I don't have the red of the cloth painted yet, we know that it's going to be picking up some of the pinks of the cloth, right? They're going to be reflecting back into the shadow side of the apple. So the far apple slice, that's its shadow might lean a pinkish purple because it's picking up the cloth. Whereas perhaps the apple that's closer is a bluish purple because it's picking up some of the reflection of the spoon or the bowl. And you can see the final one, I went with green. And whenever I can slip some greens into this painting, I'm going to try, because I have a lot of I have a red napkin, I have a pink apple, and if I can get some nice greens singing against its complementary red, it's going to look pretty nice. And you know what? I probably also just saw green. Sometimes you see a little whiff of something and you go, oh yeah, okay, let me see if I can push that in there. Usually though, for shadows, my own personal preference for shadows, and I just, I do want to say this is all my preference, and you've got to ask yourself what you like to see in your own painting, and find out, if you're watching this, there's something about my painting that you like, but it might not be all of it, might not even be most of it, and that's what I think makes different artists. We're looking at different techniques, and we're picking out that one thing that, you know, really sings to us. Speaking of singing, oh, I love that color. I think that's my Caribbean turquoise or my green. I had like a green lake down, I think, temporarily. That's a nice color. I don't know if it works there or not. That looks pretty bright, but that is a nice color. Anyways, I was going to say the shadows is I try not to make them too chromatic. Reflected light, I will increase the chroma for, but if my shadows have the same chroma as my light, I just don't find they read very well for me. But in that case there of that apple I just painted, where it has that higher chroma, you can see, I mean the bottom right apple with that bluish green mark that I was saying that I really like, that is high chroma, and it reads, if I squint, it goes away. But if I don't squint, it reads as being lighter because high chroma reads as a lighter value to us. And so it can have the illusion of a reflected light even in the shadow. Okay, we're heading into the pinks of the apple. Before starting this, I definitely want to have a nice clean brush. And the brush I'm using here is an Ellipse 8, size 8. It's a big flat brush. It's a very soft brush, which I can use very easily because this is a wood panel. So when I do these pinks, right, I'm looking for a hot pink. That might mean cad orange plus magenta, or cad orange plus quinacridone rose or opera, but you're looking for a hot pink. And what I mean by that is a pink that leans towards orange, not that leans towards purple. And the reason is because I have a hot light. So if I have a purple on here, it's probably not going to read as clear that there's a warmth to the light. So when I'm mixing these, like I said, cad orange, cad red, opera rose, magenta. Not too much magenta because that will cool it down a lot. But those are the only colors plus white that are in these mixtures. So there is no yellow, there is no blue, because I'm painting a very pure color right now. It's hot pink, it's reds, it's oranges. So I don't want to be desaturating them until I get maybe some detail. So there is some green and stuff that I add in that top left slice. There's a bit of green. Of course, for the green, I have, you know, cad yellow and ultramarine blue. But for that base color, it's pure. And my brush is clean. And I'm just saying that a lot because a lot of people ask, or they seem to like the colors I put down, or ask how I got that color. And I never know exactly how to answer. So I think, you know, I think it largely comes from having a very clean color mixture and a clean brush and not letting other things creep into it unintentionally. So yeah, I know that helps. Okay, we're going to this back apple, which has some green, some reflection of the napkin, and again, probably want to keep that back apple pretty simple. Okay, you see that mark I just made at the top left? The one that brought the skin of the apple, so the top slice, where it has that skin of the red apple coming around, that was a wrong stroke, and I actually go wipe that off later. It doesn't look right, because what I did there was I painted in my head. I thought, oh, that'll go around, but actually, it didn't go around. I didn't see it, and it already even looks wrong here, especially when I squinted at it. You know, I don't see that at all, so I'll end up knocking that back. So while I have all these colors on my palette, you know, looking for when I squint, what are the details I see? I was really doing a lot of that. I feel like still life, I always go back to the basics, which and for basics for me is the color mixing, very accurate, pure color mixing to what I want to put down because it's not going to run away from me. I'm not in any rush. And squinting to really see what is it that I'm looking at. I mean, that's quite a nice brushstroke there. I mean, if you like nothing else with this painting, that little brushstroke, see, I almost ruined it there. I went back and knocked it down. Of the dark and the light of that seed hole is quite nice. That was 2 brushstrokes, and it read as a little hole on the side of the shadow side of the apple. And that came from squinting. I squinted at it and I said, I see a little bit of a dark patch on the left and a little bit of a bright patch on the right. And that's what I painted. This is fun. Painting is fun and sometimes frustrating. I will not lie. I told my students in my class before that I have punched a canvas. I have punched a canvas once. It deserved it. And I will offer this service to my students as well. Every so often you need to punch your canvas. So I don't want to pretend like, it's always happy days for me and I'm over here giggling. I mean, I do very much enjoy this, as probably as a parent. But, we all have days where we wonder what is wrong with our brain, and it can be discouraging. I'm sure nobody has ever taken apple slices so seriously. Apples is a great reward to doing this, isn't there? Can't even say what it is. It's just so much fun to really look at something. That's what I do enjoy, painting from life because I have to work harder if I paint from a photograph. When I paint from a photograph, I have to remember all the things I saw when I was painting from life. But here it's like a good, honest truth, of what's there, and it's more enjoyable for me. So this side of the apple I'm painting right now, the middle left one, is in shadow. So I mentioned this in my previous demo, but I'm always painting in respect to how light is hitting objects and flowing over them. And by that, I mean the light side and the dark side. So even if I saw a bunch of light being reflected back here from the spoon maybe, I wouldn't paint it as bright. I really want to make sure that I'm always respecting where the light is hitting, and the light wouldn't be hitting the back side of that apple. For the darker areas, like that red that makes up the back side of the apple, you're going to be looking for a cooler red. That means maybe more alizarin crimson or magenta, maybe some ultramarine blue, some cad red. You want to knock down the chroma, but also keep it purplish red. I think you could maybe push that into a brighter purple and see how that looks, but I kept it pretty neutral. So right there, I'm redefining edges again. So that apple, that slice in the middle left, it's definitely one that is grabbing attention. So I'm looking at the finer details now. Where is it getting a bit lighter or darker? And I was noticing a cooler streak, despite the warm light, in that, bottom left corner of that apple. Across the top of the apple, the apple is wet, so moist, damp. It's not dried out. So it's going to be picking up some reflections, some highlights of the light that's sparkling off it. Usually on the top, edges, can attract, in this case, a highlight. The top edge of it, and maybe along the, I know you call it the skin, the bottom skin. But, I mean, there's not many. It's certainly not metal or anything, right? But a few subtle highlights could go a long way. And what you see me doing now, it's kind of finicky, right? We went in, we did the main surfaces, and now what am I doing? I'm just sort of booping around. Oh, there we go. See? Finally got rid of that skin that didn't make sense. But I'm booping around. And this is because I have just been painting for, I don't know, an hour. I did my color mixing, my underpainting, maybe an hour and a half, right? And all this painting. And I need to now transition from the apple to doing the cloth to do the sugar. And it's like, I would rather just sit here and play around with a few details of the apple while I have all my colors out, than actually, move on. So as you can see here, it's very, very good to take a break and to do a palette mix down like you're seeing. get your colors together, figure out what you have, remix what you don't, and probably go grab a cup of tea because this is a lot of work for your brain. And that's also why I do not record these with me talking. I have tried to in the past and was shocked at what I painted. It's a marathon. It's like my brain is on a treadmill when I'm painting. So then to explain what I'm doing as I'm doing it, my my words don't even work. Okay, so here you see me color mixing. I need to paint the sugar. I need to paint the cloth next. So a lot of the reds that we use for the apple are in the cloth, but how is the cloth different? That's what we're always looking at, right? How does the cloth color, I mean, is the cloth literally the same color as the apples? No. How is it different? And as in its hue, in its chroma, and its value. So we can definitely say the cloth is going to be oranger than the pink of the apples. They're pink lady apples, you know, so that makes sense. And so we want to mix according to that, which maybe means having more cad orange or cad yellow into our cloth mixture. And right here, I'm laying down some of my shadows. I can dance the shadows in and get them in a bit lighter, a bit looser, because if I keep them thinner, then I can just paint over them with thick paint very easily, maybe even leaving a bit of transparency in here. For the shadows, they are cooler, so maybe we're looking at some magenta, some ultramarine blue, some cad red, and probably some lemon yellow to knock down the chroma. So I said that because I only had 2 primaries really, and what I just listed. So I'm gonna need 3 primaries in the shadows normally in order to get the chroma down. What I should be doing right now is moving faster. I mean, you know, these shadows should be done in 30 seconds. But I had so much fun doing the apples, and I'm probably a little bit tired in my brain. And I'm thinking, oh yeah, like, you know what, how good it felt to paint those apples? Let's just go back in there and fix that little problem. That's what I'm thinking. Um, and notice though that the difference between the shadow side of the apple and the cast shadow of the cloth in the apple is a big difference. I have a white item in shadow against the cast shadow of a darker item. So I may want to reduce that contrast either by darkening the light side, or sorry, the shadow side of the apple, or by lightening the cast shadow in the cloth. Or maybe I just don't care and I say, look, it's high contrast and a shadow, kind of breaks the rule, but that's what I want. When I drag the cast shadow, that red that you see me making right now, that brushstroke is going into the spoon, and I just switched it to a bit of green because I want to have a lost edge. I don't see any edge between the cast shadow of the apple and the shadow side of the spoon. The spoon is like a little dome, so the left side should be darker because the light is sort of hitting its outer wall, and then it's in a bit of shadow. And this spoon I finick around with a lot, like too much. I think what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna speed this up because this is not my best painting of a spoon. I think with metal, less is more, and I just did too many strokes here, and then I end up going back and kind of scraping it anyways. So yeah, so let's just fast forward from here, and I'll just increase the speed, and I'll keep talking about the spoon later. Actually, I guess one note is that the metal is, purple, and we're going from darker colors to lighter colors, and looking for a warmer color in the light, as I mentioned with the dome. And the highlights for everything, I will always put on last. I mean, barring some exceptions. So when you see me do the spoon, you will not actually see me finish the spoon until our final part of the demo. Okay, so we see that I have the sugar done, and I have my apples in. Now I have the spoon, the plate, the napkin, and the whole apples to tackle. And I also have the bowl of the sugar bowl as well, which is going to be very similar to the plate. So I'm going back in and redefining the sugar. So when you're looking at the photograph, if you look at my reference, you may say, that's a lot of white. There's sugar, there's the plate, there's the bowl that the sugar is in. There's maybe you even see the whites of the apple as being quite white in the photograph. So it's important that when I begin this painting, I decide what is the difference. This is something you should look for yourself. And it's not that obvious in the photograph. In person, I do see it much more obviously. But generally what I'd be saying here is something like the sugar in the light is cooler than the plate. I have a hot, warm light. It's an artificial hot light on my still life setup. I think it's at 4,000, is it Kelvin? So it's a very warm light. And so you might be thinking, well, then I'm going to have a very warm light on my sugar. And the light in the sugar is warm, but it has to be a little bit bluer than the light on the porcelain because I see the sugar as being a bit more crisp than the porcelain. And you can think about different types of porcelain that you have in your house and different china, and how sometimes it's more of a bone white, right? Which might you might have you thinking of warms and yellows into that china. So think about how you can show the difference here so that the white of the sugar is different to you than the white of the plate. Now I just made a stroke there on the bowl of the sugar. The sugar itself, the bowl, is in shadow, almost entirely in shadow. The left side is getting a little bit of light, but most of it's in shadow. This is a white in shadow, and this can be very difficult for some people because you struggle to push it into a darker range, right? Because your brain is screaming white, 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 but you know, whites and shadows are still quite dark. You're looking to get that down to maybe a value 6 or a value 7 in some places. And in the darks of whites, you want to lower the chroma, just like any shadow, and you want to compare it to the things around it. So we have a very dark spoon that's on the right side of that bowl, and that's almost value 9, I would say, for that spoon, right? But if you do in the shadow a high contrast, so the shadow of the bowl next to the very dark spoon, then you're going to create potentially an unexpected focal point, the worst case. But on the other hand, you might be creating too much distraction in the shadows so that doesn't read as shadow, which means you would either want to darken the right side of the bowl that's in shadow, or you want to lighten the spoon so that there's not as much contrast between the two of them since they're both in the shadow. Hopefully I'm making some sense. So right now you see me, I have painted the shadow in. Gray is not on the color wheel, so maybe the hue here is a bit purple, a bit green. It's going to be a cooler shadow because our light in this case is warm. And you also want to compare it to that inside shadow of the bowl, right? The left side of the inside of the bowl we see is in shadow, and there's being a bit of shadow cast onto the sugar. Now there's lumps of sugar in this, I'll talk a bit about how I painted the sugar itself. Looks like I'm just over here cleaning my palette. So while I'm doing that, the lumps of the sugar, sometimes I paint them more deliberately, but I do find that the sugar is best thought of as a surface that's pretty continuous across. A couple shadows of 1 or 2 value darker can work. I have one here, but you don't want to probably paint every lump that you see in the sugar because it can be a bit distracting and take away from the idea of the sugar itself. So that's why you see that the sugar that I painted, right, is mostly just a flat surface with a few little darker areas, slightly darker. I did go too dark initially, that's why I'm saying slightly darker. Areas of shadow to indicate those lumps there. Okay, so coming into the spoon. Well, what is metal, right? So metal reflects the items around it. In this case here, mostly it's just pretty dark, but it is going to pick up some of the red of the apple and some of the highlights of the bowl. It's going to reflect a bit of that. I think I actually do come in and work at the spoon a few times, but normally the metal leans purple That's usually a safe bet to go with metal. However, here I did push it into the green range because I felt like it would be a nice complement against the red of the apples. So we have the apples next to them, right? And they're very pink, very red. If I push that metal into a green range, you can see how that might sing a bit nicer together than the purple. And so I leave the purple a warm purple for more of the lights and keep the shadows of, or the darker areas of the spoon in that darker neutral green. I suppose with metal though, you want to keep it pretty neutral and pretty dark. So there is no white in that pile of green that I have painted the spoon with. Preserving the darks of the metal really helped the sell metal because the highlights will look brighter. And what says metal is really bright highlights against the darkness of the metal. So here I'm adding some of that reflected red of the apples. I think, often with metal, less is more, like in glass. So as I go through and finish this painting, you might even see me scraping back a little bit. And actually scraping back is just it's something I don't do enough, but it's actually very rewarding. Imagine you spent a few hours painting today and you just weren't that happy with a couple areas, just scrape them off because by the time you work at this again tomorrow, those areas will be dry and it'll be lovely to paint over. You'll actually just love painting over scraped paint. So, no worries, just scrape that off and give it another go. There's no point in looking at something that you don't like. I don't know if that's just me, but there's so many times where I look at something and I don't like it, and then I sit there and spend all this time convincing myself why it is correct. It doesn't really matter if it's correct. If you don't like it, scrape it off. I think that's the best advice that I can give, even to myself. I should take that on board much more often. So we have some shadows here of the plate. And I believe that they were darker in this area than the actual shadows of the bowl. So it's cast shadows in the plate. The spoon's casting a shadow. The bowl itself is casting a shadow. I definitely was just too finicky here. So, I could probably speed this up. Just sometimes I guess it's nice to see where I'm just sort of playing around. Like this is an example of me putting that shadow down, probably thinking it's a bit too dark, not chromatic enough, and maybe not red enough. So working in some more pinks. So, you can correct as you go. No one will come after you. So right there, I'm just doing a lost edge from the rim of the bowl into the spoon. I'm looking for a lot of lost edges around here. So lost edges is when you can't detect a color between two different areas, between the spoon and its cast shadow, between the rim of the bowl and the spoon. And pushing these lost edges where possible can really add a lot of realism to your painting, which seems counterintuitive, but it really does. Now this rim of the bowl, I start to paint a little bit of it in. Usually I will leave that to a bit later. What you see right now is actually just the underpainting that is forming the rim. So where I have put in the cast shadow and the shadow form of the inside of the bowl, that's just me cutting into the underpainting and leaving what's there beneath. But I like that, so that's why I leave the rim until later because it gives me a chance to say, do I like the underpainting showing through? Does that work or do I need to change it up? But regardless, when you're doing the rim of something, whether it be a cup or a bowl or this little sugar bowl, you want to look for that color variation around the rim. Even if you don't see it, and you probably do see it if you're painting from life, then you want to push that. Well, what I mean is that maybe the left side of it is more purple and the right side is more green. Maybe the left side is a little bit lighter and the right side is a little bit darker. So look for across all surfaces potential hue variations, and if you're not sure, just make them up and paint what feels nice. I think one of the best tips for the rim besides color hue changes is those strokes I just did there, which is I didn't take the brush and drag it around in a circle. Instead, I actually painted the direction of the plane. The rim of the top, right? Rim of the sugar bowl. It's parallel to the ground, if that makes sense, So it's on a different plane than the sides of the bowl. So the plane of the bowl goes down, but the actual rim, the top of the rim, is like a flat surface. And so you can play around with changing your brushstrokes here to paint in the direction of the plane so that you don't have a dizzying stroke, stroke, stroke. You can kind of imagine it, right? With the brush being dragged all around in a circle of the bowl. Okay, looks like it's time to get into our plate. So how does the plate compare to the white of the bowl? So I said before that the plate is going to be, well, of course it's going to change hue across the surface, but the plate is going to be warmer than the bowl, a little bit darker and a little bit warmer than the sugar in the bowl. That means you might be going to our cad orange, our cad yellow, our yellow ochre, and maybe dragging in just a bit of blue because it's not an orange plate, right? And that stroke I just did, you saw me drag it into the bowl there. So the stroke from the plate into the left side of the bowl, you can see it still there. You can go back, rewind, you want to see it again. That is creating a lost edge. That's what just happened there. Because I didn't see any edge between them, because they were very similar in value. So I created a lost edge. And yeah, so like I said, we're going to have our darker, warmer color on the plate. And I'm thinking now in my head, I can remember what I'm thinking. I'm approaching the apple. I don't want to keep using the same color. As I get close to the apple, as I get close to that nice pinkish orange cloth, what do you think is going to happen? Maybe the plate is picking up some of the pink of the apple, some of the pink of the cloth. This makes sense. It should be reflecting into it. So as I go closer to the apple and the cloth, as I move farther away from light, it's going to get a little bit more pink, so the hue is going to change, and maybe a bit darker as well, because I'm moving away from the light. The plate has different, I don't know what you want to call them, surfaces, you know, the outside ring. I mean, I know you know what a plate looks like, but they're going to kind of grab light a bit differently, right? So the far side of the plate, the area I'm painting now, that is the edge of the plate, and it's sort of tilted up just a bit to catch the light. So we might consider it being a bit brighter. However, that area, so between the far right apple and the cast shadow of the spoon, that is in a little bit of a sun trap. And what I mean by that is that because it's surrounded by different darker values, it may look brighter. So we want to just be aware of that illusion when we get to painting that. Okay, I'm moving over now and painting some more highlights around the inside of the bowl. Before wrapping up, I guess, the final touches of this bowl. So now we're going to work on the napkin. It's a cloth napkin. And what I do here is sort of just dance in the shadows. So think of the napkin, like everything, as three-dimensional. It is a rectangle cut in half, a three-dimensional rectangle, which means it's going to have a light side and a shadow side. It's not flat. So the right side of the napkin, think of that as a wall. So those darker areas that you see me putting in right now on the right side of the napkin, think of that as a vertical wall of a rectangle. Even though we know that, we think of a napkin as being quite flat, if you think of it more in this three-dimensional way and you paint it first as being like almost an inch thick, right? Which maybe it is, you'll get more form on the napkin. As well, when I put those darker shadows in and um, and have them a bit thinner, so that's what I mean by dancing the shadows in. It usually means that I'm moving with a looser brush, a bit thinner paint. I can go over that very easily with thicker paint. And I am painting on a wood panel here. I didn't mention that. Normally I paint on canvas. Wood panels are much more difficult to paint on, but can be very rewarding. So, use at your own risk. Anyways, it looks like I was not ready to let go of the spoon. Sometimes you know something's not right and you keep coming back to it. So apologies. I will do this a few times. Anywho, so we're going into the orangish pink napkin now. Before you paint it, start thinking about which side is what hue. Okay, so we're going to say on the left here it is warmer, and maybe on the right side it is cooler, meaning that it's oranger and pinker. So as I go and paint these brush strokes in here, I'm using a very large brush. This is, I think, a size 8 rosemary. It's the ellipse brush. It's a very soft brush, very nice. Oh, such a nice brush. And because I'm on a wood canvas, or sorry, a wood panel, there's very little friction, very little friction. And that means that a softer brush like this will work very well. I'm probably using a bit of medium, probably using a little bit of my solvent-free gel, but I don't need much. Soft brush will work on this. As I carve in here though with that orange, I'm redefining again the shape of the shadow, the shape of the spoon, potentially looking for a lost edge. And you can see now I switched over to another brush, an ellipse as well, a smaller brush, what it is I can see the shape of the spoon is wrong. Spoons are one of those objects I find it's sort of best to stop looking at the spoon in real life and just paint a spoon. Because I feel like my mind has a way of figuring that out for myself. Anywho, so we go in here, there's a little few ripples and stuff, but I'm ignoring that. You see I'm putting in these big brush strokes, and this is why sometimes it's very good to use a bigger brush, especially when you have a surface like this, because it stops you from trying to niggle at the little ripples, right? This is a surface. That's its core at its fundamental level. The napkin is a flat surface where light is traveling across. The little ripples can come later, and we want to kind of consider how much they add. When I was doing this, I actually went back because you see, I'm not painting ripples in now. I went back and I added in my little folds and my ripples of the napkin. And you know what it did? It looked like poop. Because it was too much information. It was like, why? I'm looking at these pretty apples. Why am I suddenly seeing all the weird little folds of your napkin you didn't iron, you know? And I took it out and I was like, oh, much better, you know? But that's the decision you have to make, you know? That's the great, amazing wonderfulness of being an artist is that you can decide what you want to tell people. And if you want to tell people that there are 1,000 folds in here, then by all means, tell people that. Anywho, so you can see me now, there's a little bit on the right side that's getting that more purplish and darker. So I'm starting to kind of indicate there are ripples there, but how do I see the ripples when I squint? I see them as a whole as being a little bit darker. And there's a little bit of a dark patch at the top of the corner there that I think is actually already becoming a little bit distracting. So I wouldn't be surprised if I end up knocking that out. But yeah, so you see what I'm doing here. You see I keep going back to the pile. I'm adding in some medium. Probably going to be thinking about changing that hue and different shades of light. So here where it's facing the light more, maybe it's a bit more yellow. Maybe I'm getting some more cad yellow. Just choose something different than you have for the other areas, right? Yeah. Oh yeah, and so here as we approach the apple, I am adding a little bit of probably some red and some green into that. So remember that, of course, green is a complement of red. So if I can fit some greens into this cloth, that's going to look really nice. It's really surprising, but if you paint something like a red napkin and there are no greens in the red napkin, it looks dead. I don't know. It's like a dead fish. I don't know why that is. I mean, I kind of know why, like theoretically, I know why it is, but I also don't know why. I get that kind of why, you know. Um, but you would be shocked at if you just plug in some greens into your napkin, into your apple. Yeah, just how much it can make a huge difference in the reading of the color. Okay, let's pause there. We have another like 2 hours of this to go through to actually complete the painting, and you're going to see me finishing a painting.